Hi, I'm the Friendly Scoutmaster. In this video, I'm going to talk about sleeping bags. So let's talk for just a second about sleeping bags. I believe your sleeping bag is the most important item that you will take on your adventure. The reason for this is quite simple. First of all, your sleeping bag is a safety item. So if you get too cold, it's going to be the only thing that's going to help warm you up other than a fire. The second is, you really need to get a good night's sleep. A good night's sleep is really valuable to make sure that you are mentally and physically prepared for the adventures for the next day. What type of sleeping bag should you bring on your next adventure? Well, the answer to that question will depend on how you answer many other questions. One of the first questions you have to ask yourself is, what will I be doing? Will you be canoeing, say, in the boundary waters of Canada, where you'll be essentially backpacking in a boat, and therefore your risk of capsizing the boat and all of your equipment becoming completely soaked with water is very high? The sleeping bag that you would bring on a through hike of the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, or the Pacific Crest Trail will look much different than a sleeping bag that you would take to climb Mount Everest or explore the polar ice caps. And those two sleeping bags might look very different for just a sleeping bag that you would take on a regular overnight camp out, or possibly even when you're backpacking at Philmont. The temperature rating of the sleeping bag is also a very important consideration. What you should do is do some homework, and you should learn what the normal high and low temperature is for the place that you're going to be visiting. And then also look at the record highs and lows, how far back they were, so you can make an intelligent decision as to what the temperature rating should be of your sleeping bag. So, how does that temperature rating end up on the side of your bag? Quality sleeping bag manufacturers have generally started to accept and adopt the EN sleeping bag rating system. The EN system is a European standard, and basically it came out of a need to standardize temperature ratings across different sleeping bag manufacturers. So many years ago, sleeping bag manufacturers would try to use a combination of loft and actual user testing to determine what the temperature rating of a sleeping bag they created should be. And this could vary wildly. Some sleeping bag manufacturers would say that their sleeping bag is a 20-degree sleeping bag, when in fact you probably will only be warming it to maybe 30 or 35 degrees. And conversely, they could say this is a 20-degree sleeping bag, and you might be very comfortable in it at 10 degrees. So it varied wildly depending on the manufacturer's specifications and just what they wanted to put on the tag on the sleeping bag. So the European standard really came about to help consumers decide which sleeping bag they should use and standardize the temperature rating system. So there are 3 numbers in the EN temperature sleeping bag rating system. There is the comfort level, which is generally regarded as a temperature level that women or females who tend to sleep cooler would be comfortable in a sleeping bag at. There is the lower EN rating, which is the temperature at which males who tend to sleep warmer are comfortable at. And then there is the extreme rating, which is the temperature rating at which the sleeping bag will basically not let you die. So those are the 3 EN temperature ratings. If your synthetic sleeping bag gets wet, it doesn't mean that it's going to be comfortable to sleep in. Nothing that's wet is going to be comfortable. However, the synthetic sleeping bag is going to offer the fact that if it is completely soaked in water, it will still retain its loft, and therefore it will still provide insulative value to you and help keep you warm just in case you get it wet. Let's talk about down sleeping bags and exposing them to water. Now, generally speaking, The marketing industry has made a big deal out of down sleeping bags and down jackets, down in general, not liking water. And it is true. That's why they created synthetic insulation. But I can tell you from personal experience, I own down jackets, I own down sleeping bags. I have yet to have a down jacket or a down sleeping bag be rendered even partially useless by being exposed to water. And that's principally because I take care of my stuff. I'm not really concerned if it's a synthetic or a down sleeping bag. I don't want either one of them getting wet. So if I have a down sleeping bag, I for sure will pack it in an ultralight waterproof stuff sack, which will be inside of my backpack, which in turn is going to be underneath a pack cover, which is waterproof if it's raining outside. And if it's not in that dry stuff sack, inside my dry backpack, underneath my pack cover, it will be inside my tent with the rain cover on and the rain fly zipped shut. So I do not give any opportunity for water to get a hold of either my synthetic sleeping bag, synthetic jacket, my down jacket, or my down sleeping bags. There are two types of insulation that sleeping bags are made out of, synthetic and down. Synthetic sleeping bags are made of fibers or insulation that is a man-made material. Down sleeping bags are feathers that typically come from geese, and so therefore they're natural. There's a big difference between synthetic and down sleeping bags, and they both have an ideal place in the backcountry. Synthetic sleeping bags were made because down sleeping bags, generally speaking, if they get wet, either from high humidity environments or they're completely soaked in water, the feathers clump together and they lose all of their insulated value, rendering the sleeping bag useless, and also they take a very, very long time to dry out, especially in the backcountry. So synthetic sleeping bags were made so that backcountry users could have a sleeping bag that when it got wet, or if the environment was very humid, the sleeping bag would retain its loft or its insulated value and therefore still keep you warm even though it might be completely soaked in water or it's very humid outside. The quality of down that is in your sleeping bag is a consideration. There's a number called the fill power. So what is fill power? Fill power is basically a number that says how many cubic inches can 1 ounce of down fill. So for lower end sleeping bags, the fill power might be 500, which means 1 ounce of that down will fill a container that is 500 cubic inches in volume. Conversely, a high-end, high-quality down might be a fill power of 900. In that case, 1 ounce of down will fill a container with 900 cubic inches of volume, almost twice the volume of the 500 fill power sleeping bag, and therefore the high-quality down will fill up almost twice as much space as the lower quality down represented by the lower fill power. The weight of the sleeping bag is important. If you're just car camping and you're not carrying your sleeping bag anywhere, it really doesn't matter how much your sleeping bag weighs. However, if you're backpacking or you're climbing mountains, the weight of your sleeping bag is extremely important. So, take into consideration how much weight you're willing to carry when you're backpacking or you're climbing. Now, if you're on a through hike, you're probably going to have a sleeping bag that's going to weigh less than 2 pounds. If you're backpacking, or for example, most scouting activities, generally speaking, I would recommend that you get a sleeping bag that weighs less than 3 pounds. If you're winter climbing or camping, you're really just buying a sleeping bag rated for the temperature that you need. Hopefully that sleeping bag is less than 5.5 pounds, but it really is just going to depend on the temperature that you're sleeping in, and that's going to drive all of your decision making. How big your sleeping bag is when it's inside of its stuff sack is also important. If you're through hiking, you want that sleeping bag to be as small as possible, typically because you are not going to be carrying a very large pack, and you're going to want to have extra room in your pack for more things besides just your sleeping bag. For typical people who are just backpacking and camping, you want your sleeping bag to be between 10 and 12 liters in size. This allows you to easily take it backpacking with most 55 to 75 liter backpacks. And if you're camping in the winter, your sleeping bag is going to be inside of a compression stuff sack, and you're going to compress it down as tight as you can. But also your backpack will be larger so that you can fit that sleeping bag in it, plus all the extra equipment you need to take for the winter. The length that you choose to buy your sleeping bag in is very important. My recommendation for those that are still growing is if the parents are less than 5 foot 10 inches, you might consider just buying a regular length sleeping bag. If either parent is 5 foot 10 inches or taller, then you need to buy a long length sleeping bag, which is generally 6 foot 6. If either parent is taller than 6 foot 2 inches, you might want to look for a sleeping bag that's even longer than 6 foot 6 inches. The length of the sleeping bag is important. If the user is short relative to the length of the sleeping bag, that's a lot of extra air that the user has to heat up at night, and therefore the sleeping bag will be cooler. Conversely, if the sleeping bag is too short, the insulation will be compressed because it's tight fitting around your body, and not only will you be uncomfortable, but you've compressed the insulation from the inside out, and therefore the sleeping bag will sleep cooler. Let's talk about sleeping bag construction for just a second. There are two basic types of sleeping bag construction. There are quilts and mummy-style sleeping bags. Quilt sleeping bags are basically like a blanket that you would sleep in, and there's a zipper that extends all the way down the side of your body and around the end of your foot box. Now, sometimes there's not a zipper at the end of the foot box, there's a draw cord closure. Mummy sleeping bags typically have a zipper that extends down the side of your body, and they have a little hood that you stick your head into, and that helps keep your head warm. And remember, most of the heat loss from your body comes from your head. Now, the advantage of a quilt is that typically you can unzip it all the way and lay it over you like a down comforter or a blanket. The advantage of a mummy sleeping bag is some would contend that it is warmer per weight because it has the hood that extends over your head. A lot of people don't like mummy sleeping bags because they feel too constricted in it. And so the size, the girth of your sleeping bag should be fitted to the width or girth of your body, your shoulders, your hips. And so that way your mummy-style sleeping bag isn't very uncomfortable to sleep in. You should also take into account if you're a side sleeper or a back sleeper when you're looking at which style sleeping bag you should choose. This REI Lumen sleeping bag is a great choice for most users in most environments. It's a synthetic sleeping bag with a 20-degree temperature rating at the EN lower level. If you're on a through hike of the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, or the Pacific Crest Trail, your ultra lightweight sleeping bag can be your best friend. So if your next adventure takes you to the Himalayas, say to climb Mount Everest, or to the North or South Pole, or perhaps just winter mountaineering in the Rockies, your choice of sleeping bag is a life and death decision. Well, thank you for watching this video. If you found anything in this video valuable at all, please hit the like button. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And as always, thank you for watching.